Everts, a few years ago you were born in Bellingham, Washington. Just a few years ago.
Along with my mother.
Yeah, right. You're an artist who works in varied mediums, and you've been a professor, a teacher, had a very important gallery. You've done a lot of stuff, Connor.
You left out longshoring, which I support.
No, that's coming next.
Oh, that's coming next.
You were also a longshoreman, and what I want to know, when you worked in shipping, did you know Charles Bukowski?
Yeah, I didn't know him through shipping, but I met him, I think I met him at a gallery before I opened Exodus, and Exodus was 56, and he came to the gallery openings all the time.
Ah, interesting.
Yeah.
What was he like?
Well, I was most impressed by his hands. He had big hands.
Ah.
He wasn't cultured. I mean, you know, he had no pretenses. He had strong opinions. He was basically like a working class guy. He could have fit in at any bar along the waterfront, and he often did, I guess.
Yeah, right. And wrote about them.
Yeah, yeah.
What drove you to the craziness of being an artist?
My mother was interested in art, and I drew well, and she encouraged me. It was something that just held my interest. I enjoyed doing it. It brought me great joy. For me, art was, rather than being right or wrong, it was different than. And that appealed to me very young in life.
Did you do artwork in school? Did you doodle? Did you draw stuff?
We were shirt-tail poor. We lost the farm and all. It was during the Depression. So I was always wearing sweatshirts, and the other kid had nice flannel shirts, or flannel shirts at least. And so I started drawing on them with crayons and then ironing. And so I could trade in school. Often the parents would be upset about the new sweatshirt being ruined, but other times they went along with it. But that probably was my most lucrative time in my art career, was the sweatshirt craze. I was introduced formally to art training actually from the boyfriend of my youngest sister, and he would get rid of me. He was a cartoonist of sorts, and he would give me work to copy. And so this would take me time, and you know, they could do what they wanted to do, whatever that was, before I could bother them again. So art was always there, and then there was that was the beginning of comic books, and there were only 2 comic books at the time. And I really enjoyed the art of Alex Raymond and Hogarth. Alex Raymond did Flash Gordon, and the other did Tarzan. Hogarth did Tarzan. And
because
so,
Hogarth was, you know, that very famous British painter.
No, that wasn't that Hogarth. No, more formal art. My introduction to more formal art actually came, I guess it must have been in about, the 4th grade, maybe 5th. All these girls were checking out the ruins of Pompeii, and there was a waiting list. And so I got on the list, and I got the book. And of course it was based upon the ruins of Pompeii, and it had all this nude sculpture and such. And it didn't strike me that what it was that the girls were interested in. I just got interested, and so then I started drawing from the sculpture. I realized the other day that I'm a genre painter. My work is always based on something just outside of myself that's common. And as I said, I always drew well, and that's how I got into the figurative muse, because I did abstract at one time. I did abstract, but it didn't fit me well. You know, I've always subscribed to the fact that art isn't about art. It's about everything else, but uses the vocabulary of art. I was a great admirer of Guston.
Oh, Philip Guston.
Philip Guston. And one time in a conversation, you know, he said that every time I do a stroke, I want to make a stroke unlike any stroke I've ever made. And I do that, and then I look at it and see if I can accept it, if it's different from any other stroke. And I looked at that, and I pictured his work, And I thought, Jesus, it's not real. I mean, the marvelous thing about his thing, or his work, isn't at all dissimilar, you know? And then I realized later, when I was working, that I was looking at it, and my notion of difference was very broad, where his notion of difference was almost imperceivable. And I thought, and then when I went to see a show in San Francisco, there was a little old lady there, and she said, you know, I'm getting older, I'm 94, and so I always try to give myself a challenge. I try to look at something and understand something that I can't understand. And she said, I think it's keeping me young. And she said, but I'm going to go downstairs and look at the stuff I know I like. And I told her, I said, well, you know, people say, I don't know anything about art, but I know what I like. I said, I know a lot about art, but I only like what I like. You know, it doesn't mean you have to like everything, but you do have to be open.
There also then, in 1957, you established Exodus Gallery in San Pedro, California. Which was
56.
Was it 56?
Yeah.
Well, now this is a conflict now, because I read that in 57 it was the Exodus Gallery, but in 56 there was something called the Exodus Group.
Yeah, it was the same thing. Well, we took the show right after it closed, or shortly after it closed.
Where, at Ferris?
It closed at Ferris, and just shortly after that, we took it down to
because I wasn't sure of the
to
sequence.
Exodus.
Because at Ferris is when Wallace Berman had all that, you know, that he was busted.
Yeah.
For the pornography and eroticism or whatever the hell it was.
Well, I've always been against censorship of ideas or censorship of people, or all of that. You know, I've been for the underdog, and so I couldn't sit still and, you know, not have it. We found the place we wanted in San Pedro.
The location came because you found a space, because I wondered why a gallery in, of all places in that time, in San Pedro, California.
The background of San Pedro was a union town. And then during the Depression, all of basically the stores like Sears and Penny's and all those stores determined that they were going to break the strike. And so what happened was, you know, it was a vital town. And the people, even though there wasn't a bridge, the people drove to Long Beach, because it was mostly a union town. It was very short-sighted. So the town died because those things never came back. We did collage shows, we did reject shows from the county museum, drawing shows when drawing wasn't considered. We were very active in kind of promoting the thing. That's what I wanted to do with art. I wanted to get, because young art and artists weren't being seen, and I wanted not to be as doctrinaire as Ed's gallery, and to be more inclusive, because if I was exclusive, it defeated what I was trying to do.
You founded something called the Los Angeles Printmaking Society.
Yeah.
Why?
Well, you know, my proletarian part was that I thought that prints basically could be a way of people with lesser means to collect art. So it could be put on and not be so precious that it couldn't be put on the refrigerator. People would live with it and then maybe throw it away.
You are a survivor of police brutality, and it resulted in severe injuries, several lawsuits, and a jury trial. You really had a first-hand look at the American justice system, didn't you?
Yeah, well, I had it twice. I had that censorship trial, too.
Oh, well, start with the first one.
The first one was the police. I was teaching at Long Beach State, but this was the last night of the class. It had been a very good class. So the students wanted to go out and have a beer and all, because it was going to be the last time we were together. We were there like a neighborhood bar. It was quiet, it was a lot of fun, and then it was during the Vietnam War. And so these guys came in and were very aggressive and saying, why aren't you the war and everything? and all this, and there was started hassling Ralph Corners, and I knew he had a temper, because I used to make him angry, and so I asked for, when they were hassling him and getting close to him and all, I asked to see their identification, and then they turned towards me, and so we went outside. The minute we got outside, they started pushing me around and everything. I asked them what were their charges, and they said, well, we'll think of something. And then they handcuffed me, and so then they put me in the police car. So I'm in the car behind the driver, and the guy would take the truncheon, and which is lead covered with leather with a loose handle, and with all of his might he'd go across my legs. And so I'd roll with the punch, and then he'd beat me across the back. At one point, you know, I was rolling and taking less of the blow, and they stopped the car, and the guy in the front seat turned around and put the truncheon across my nose and said, if you don't stop making it difficult, I'll lay your nose open across your face. Well, I have a vivid imagination, so I immediately realized that if this were true, then I would have to get a nose. I'd have to go for surgery for my nose, and I'd realize that they wouldn't have my nose. I never particularly liked my nose, but they wouldn't have my nose in the book because it wasn't a particularly memorable or repeatable nose. And so I would be there, I would figure myself going through this book, picking a nose. Well, how do you pick something as insignificant, unimportant as a nose, see? I was in this absolute quandary. So I looked at the guy and I said, you know, I've never particularly liked my nose, but I think I'll keep it the way it is. He didn't know the basis of this remark, so they thought that was a smart-ass remark. Well, it wasn't intended as so. So they just really laid into me. And I was resolved that I wouldn't make a sound. I just take the beating. And so I hear this moaning. And then all of a sudden I realize it's not them in pleasure, although this was a pleasure for them. It was me, that unconsciously it was so painful that I was reacting to it with sound. So they got me to the police station, and then they got me in the elevator, and they stopped at every floor and beat me. If the police will harass you, will beat you, then who protects you from your protector? If it hadn't been the police, I could have run, I could have fought, I could have called for help. I was locked in a car, handcuffed. I was locked in an elevator, handcuffed. What could I do? I could only listen and remember, because I thought it would come to this. You know, we're going to trial, Connor, he said, but it would be a lot easier if you didn't have the beard and the mustache. And I said, well, you know, the beard and the mustache doesn't mean that much to me. I said, and this case is important to me because there are other people that it'll affect. But I said, so I can shave off my beard and my mustache, but what does the black man do? And so I was the first person alive, because the Algiers motel incident in Detroit, they were dead. The, what was the name, Aluzzo case, the woman and the two boys that were killed in Mississippi, everybody was dead where this case was brought against people. They were dead, killed by the police? They were killed by the police, although the police were tried, but they all got off.
So what happened to the two officers that were beating the shit out of you?
Nothing. They progressed along the line, one to retirement. They became lieutenants. In fact, there was a person a lawyer who was riding with him, and he said that these people were bragging that they had shown some, faculty member, because faculties, were against the war, and the whole thing started because these kids should have been in the service. Better than that, look what happened in terms of my arrest for pornography. That was after the police had closed the show at the Zora Gallery and all. And so they closed my show, And then later they came down to interview me and pulled me out of my class. And I said, what is it that you found objectionable? He said, well, you know, there was this orifice, and he said, and then there was the phallic things. I said, well, if you start saying like that, I said, you're going to have to chop down every telephone pole. I said, watch out for those windows. You know, and I couldn't believe that they were serious about this, and so I thought that was going to be the end of it. And then Jack Hirschman, the poet, he said, I heard on the radio that you'd have been arrested. And so the people in the art world decided that we were going to take this on. This was going to be the case. This is just going too far. Clancy was making a big thing out of having this poster in the window was the same thing of having the actual element there. He said, that picture is immoral. And I said, well, you know, I said, there's a lot of, you have to realize there's a lot of difference between love and lust. So at times they may assume the same physiological position. And then when he was talking about that power, and I said, well, you know, I said, what an artist does is not the object itself, but an abstraction. I said, it would be take something, say, like communion. I said, we take communion, and I said, but if you looked at it logically, you're eating Christ, you know, because the wafer, the body, and the blood. I said, that's cannibalism. And, you know, and I looked, and two women blanched, and I knew there were a couple of Catholics on the jury, and that we'd at least have them. Well, you know, when you do something you think is true, and by being true, beautiful, and then someone else sees it as filth, you kind of have to question, are you fooling yourself? I mean, if so many people see it differently than you see it, how clear are your eyes? When they reopened the show, it sold out. But one interesting thing was that a person came in. I was there, and I had brought some other work from that same period of drawings, and he wanted the work. So there it was. Just he tore up the piece after he broke the frame, and I was really upset about breaking the frame, and the glass, because it cost me money. And he tore up the thing and stormed out. That hurt. I mean, on one level, it wasn't bad that you would, with someone you'd anger, it was never my intention to anger people, but someone would be so angry that they'd spend good money, you know, representing a lot of work on the waterfront for me, and just to destroy it. You know, I thought that was bizarre. Now I'm working on a series that's called Disparate Parts. And so every painting is divided approximately in half, and it's warm on one side and cool on the other side. And then across it, I get up about 3 o'clock in the morning to start. I write about the day, about maybe what's happening, about my feelings. I just write something, much as you'd keep a diary. And then I paint over that. And then I start taking things that don't naturally go together, and I start either replicating them in terms of writing or introducing photographs, and then all flotsam. I have people sending me grocery lists from Denmark, all these different things that I can put in, stuff from Japan, stuff from China, from all over.
The Oriental writing, is that authentic?
Yeah, it's real.
What does it say?
The thing is, people got interested in reading it. Mm-hmm. And so I thought, well, what I'll do is basically incorporate it so it'll be different languages, so different people will come along and give it a different context if they can understand it. Mm-hmm. So I have a tendency not to translate, because then that defeats the whole purpose of it.
Interesting.
I sign everything Lerwin D. Sims, because I never sign my work.
Why did you start that?
Well, because I was having a show, and like a museum show, and the person said, your work should be signed. And I was going home, I was walking, and I'm always looking down, and then all of a sudden I saw this bail release, and this guy was a scofflaw, and he had something like 246 parking violations. And so I copied his signature. Now I sometimes write it, or I sometimes letter it. So it's. I thought I should have a show called Alias.
AKA.